We're starting to see e-bikes that look more and more like motorcycles. In fact, I've got 3 of them here today. The Ebikes Cheetah, a Sondors Mad Mods, and a custom build by me. We're gonna call this one the Bolton P61 Black Widow. Now, if you love the style of these types of bikes, but you're wondering, do they actually make good electric bicycles? I'm gonna answer that question. Now, many people want their electric bike to look basically like a bicycle and to be undetectable as an e-bike. None of these fit into that category whatsoever. These are all very obviously electric bicycles. In some cases, especially like the Mad Mods, it might even be confused as a motorcycle. In addition to the 3 bicycles behind me, I actually have a surprise 4th electric bike that fits in really well with these 3 guys, but blows away on one particular metric. Stay tuned to the end, more on that later. I know many people are interested in the Mad Mods and what I think of it as far as power, performance, comfort. So I've got 3 bikes and I've got 3 different categories in which I'm going to compare them. I'm going to tell you which one of these is the most comfortable to ride. I'm going to tell you which one of these has the best performance. And finally, of course, which one has, in my opinion, the best looks. They all have standard pedals. They all have some sort of derailleur and chain setup. They are, in fact, a bicycle, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are as comfortable to ride as a bicycle. Now, I've showed other e-bikes in reviews, for example, from Juiced Bikes. I've ridden other bikes from Monday Motorbikes or Super 73. And some of those, honestly, aren't very comfortable to ride at all. They're fun if you just want to hop on and use the throttle. When you make a bike that looks like this, you make some sacrifices on comfort. If you look here on how to adjust the saddle, you'll notice that there isn't a way to adjust the saddle. You just have to hope that you are in the right height range. For example, for the Sondors Mad Mods, the seat doesn't go up or down. Now, this is the Cafe version of the bike, and one of the things it comes with is this little tail piece here. This is removable. I had to put this on when I pulled the bike out of the box, and if you take this off, this does give you a really long seat, so you can position yourself further back or further forward, and that's how you can kind of get closer or further away from the pedals. But of course, that's also going to change how far away you are from the handlebars. So very limited seating positions, no adjustment whatsoever. And honestly, the saddle that's on here looks really nice, but it's hard as a rock. This is the seating position on the Mad Mods bike, and it doesn't look too bad right here. But if I pull the pedal all the way up, you can see there is my pedaling position. That's a really sharp bend in my knee. Now, if I pull this piece off and I scoot back, that's gonna make it a little bit easier, but then I'm gonna be even further away from the handlebars. So in reality, can you pedal the bike? Yes. Is it very comfortable to do? No. And there's a second reason it's not good for pedaling either, and that's gonna be the width of the frame. Now, with a standard bicycle, you have a bar in the center here, but with this kind of twin truss, whatever they call this design, looks great, very strong and sturdy, I'm sure, but it makes the point right in front of the saddle really wide. I'd have to get a tape measure and tell you what that is, but I mean, you know, my whole hand stretched across it, I could just barely reach across the width of the frame here, which means that if you're trying to pedal, the inside of your thigh is going to be constantly rubbing on either one of these, unless you're just trying to really stretch your legs out like you're riding a horse. And stepping over to the P61, you can see that we have a very similar shape overall. You kind of have this hump over the top of the frame here, the saddle below it. You can see a similar thing right here with the shape of the Sondors Mad Mods. You've got this kind of motorcycle style seat. Now this one you'll see is quite a bit narrower in the front. The frame is still fairly wide, but just comparison to the Mad Mods, maybe a couple of inches narrower. Surprisingly, when I first built this bike, which was several months ago, well before I had the Mad Mods in my hands, because it took me about a year to get this from the time I ordered it, and it was a ton of fun to build it, totally custom bike. I've got another video, you can go watch all about that. But on my very first ride, I realized that the riding position just wasn't as great as a typical bicycle that I'm used to. But honestly, the narrower frame does make it better than the Mad Mod bike. The other reason this is going to score a little bit higher on the comfort is the fact that this bike does have some adjustment to the saddle. Now, it's not a quick adjustment, but this frame was designed with several holes in it, so you can move this up and down. So realistically, I would probably move this up so my knees aren't quite so cramped, but it looks good right there, and that's why I put it right there. Now, if you had somebody shorter, you can move that saddle down. There's quite a bit of space right here between this light and the tire here, and even this light could be moved out of the way if we wanted to lower it all the way down. So comfort-wise, this one is a little bit better. But the winner when it comes to comfort, by far, is going to be the Cheetah. You've got a more standard bicycle saddle, standard bicycle seat post. Now, does it take away from the looks of the bike? I think the vintage of motorcycles this is styled after actually had saddles that weren't too different from the way this looks. So I don't think it actually takes away from the overall appeal of the bike that much. Definitely makes it much more comfortable. If you look at the handlebars, they're swept back. So whereas these two, yes, you can pedal them, but it's just not as easy or comfortable to do. The Cheetah, realistically, you could hop on this, you could ride it all day long, pedal it all day long with no issues whatsoever. This is probably one of the more comfortable bikes I sell, period. So next, let's talk about the looks. Obviously, comfort-wise, you have to sacrifice something to make the bikes look like this. Now, the Cheetah is, in my opinion, a good looking bike. Of course, I am very biased towards the P61 bike that I built. I gotta give credit to Marty at Hop Mods that designed this frame. It's not something that's available anymore, but I know he is working on something new. But honestly, when it comes down to looks, Sondors with the Mad Mods really did knock it out of the park. I love the way this bike looks. For me, it really does win on style. So we've got the most comfortable bike, we've got the most stylish bike. Does that make this the best bike for performance? Possibly. I'm gonna cover one thing outside of the power first when I talk about performance, and that's the lights. It's kind of going into the looks. They all have these massive headlights. You might be wondering how functional those are. The Cheetah has a great looking light. It has a kind of high and low beam setting, but honestly, it's not that bright compared to the other two. These lights are massive and they are super bright. Sondors did a good job, except for one thing. Only problem with the light, and this isn't a problem on every single bike, it's only a problem on mine apparently, and it's just cosmetic. They put their own logo upside down. Sondors, if you're seeing this video, I would love to replace the light with one where your logo is facing the correct way. And like I said, this is not a review of the Sondors Mad Mods, but I think this is a good time to address quality control. Now, I was hoping, although this is a new model, that Sondors kind of has things down, They have sold tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of electric bikes, but there were a few problems with the bike. I'll have to check and see. This is only cosmetic, kind of like the upside down logo, so not a big deal. But Sondors is using these zoom brakes. You see that the Sondors logo is what I have on the left brake, but my right brake says zoom on it. I'm curious, if you have a Mad Mods, leave me a comment in this video. Do your brakes look like this? Do you have them labeled differently on each side? Seems a little odd to me. Maybe it's just the way they were made. Also cosmetic, but something that can be viewed as damage, which we never want to see on a new bike. I had pretty good scrape right here on the front wheel from how the bike was packaged. I got a little bit of a scrape on the back right here, and I was able to kind of straighten it out and get it working okay, but I did have a pretty bad kink in the brake line as well. And I've seen that on quite a few other deliveries that people have posted about online, with their brakes being pinched, their wiring harness was pinched. My wiring harness on my bike when it was delivered was pinched so bad that actually the bike didn't work. I had to get Sondors to send me a new wiring harness so I could even get the thing to turn on. So my bike, yes, did show up dead, which after a year of waiting was kind of a disappointment, but I understand that things can happen. But based on what I'm seeing online and based on how the bike arrived to me, it was not packaged very well. This bike is heavy. Now I'll get to that in just a moment. For the weight of this bike, the packaging really needs to be beefed up. Now let's talk about performance. Which one of these bikes performs the best? The Cheetah is a 750 watt hub motor. The Sondors Mad Mods is a 750 watt hub motor, both from Bafang. And then the P61, well, that's a Bafang mid-drive. This is actually the Bafang M625. These motors hadn't quite been released yet when I built this bike and did the original release video, so I couldn't show it to you yet. But now that these are out on the market, this is effectively the newest version of the BBSHD 1000 watt motor. It was a package deal, which is pretty cool. It is a 19 amp hour battery from Bafang along with the motor. So performance wise, it's pretty obvious this bike is going to win if we just went based on power alone, because we've got more wattage, we've got the mid-drive motor, we can take advantage of the gearing. This bike's going to have more torque, higher top speed, better acceleration, but there's another elephant in the room we really need to address, and that is the weight. The Cheetah is listed online as being about 75 pounds. The P61 comes in at 73 pounds, so it's going to be the lightest of the bunch here with the most power. Now we get to the Sondors Mad Mods. Like I said, I love the looks of the bike. I love the fact that it's got a 750 watt hub motor that actually performs like a 750 watt hub motor. I love the fact that it's got a 21 amp hour battery, which if you didn't know, the battery is actually in here, the lower portion of the frame. This box right here, which some of you might have thought was the battery, is basically a trunk. Super cool. You could totally fit the charger, tools, a bunch of other things in there. I really like it, so good job, Sondors. But despite the fact that it has a bigger battery and the same motor on paper as the Cheetah, this bike doesn't perform quite as well, and that is because of the weight. I honestly don't recall off the top of my head what the original weight estimate was, but I know it was somewhere in the neighborhood of these other bikes, you know, maybe in the 60, 70, 80 pound range. I want you to guess, if you don't know, in the comments, how much does this bike weigh? Got 24-inch tires and wheels. We do have full suspension. This frame is pretty beefy. You've got that big 21 amp hour battery. That triple tree fork obviously adds some weight. But how heavy is this bike? Again, we're looking at 73 pounds right here. We're looking at 75 pounds here. You know this is going to be heavier to some degree. How much does it weigh? Pause the video if you haven't taken your guess yet. Okay, now that you've unpaused the video, I'm gonna tell you 116 pounds. Incredibly heavy for an electric bike. I have bikes that have way more battery capacity, way more power, that weigh substantially less than this. The other thing we need to consider performance-wise is how well does a big heavy bike like this stop. Now they are using, thankfully, big 203mm rotors. They're using hydraulic brakes. Now the brakes are from Zoom. These are on the Aventon bikes and some other models. They're not the best, most high quality hydraulic brake. For the weight of the Sondors Mad Mod, I would like to see something a little bit better. Now for the price that I paid for the bike, I would say this was still an excellent deal. I purchased this from the original pre-order campaign Sondors had going on at a price of $14.99. Now that has changed, however. These aren't $14.99 anymore. In fact, they're not even anywhere remotely close. When I was going to release this video initially, when I first got the bike, the price had gone up to, I think it was $26.99, and it looks like they have now gone up to $29.99. So the price has literally doubled. This is now a $3,000 bike. The Cheetah is using Tektro hydraulic brakes, 180mm rotors. So the brakes are maybe a step up in quality. The rotors are a little bit smaller. And to top it off with performance, the Black Widow is by far, again, going to be the winner on braking because I'm using a full hydraulic system from Tech. Very high quality, very good performing brakes with 203mm rotors, and it's also the lightest bike. To recap, before I tell you about surprise bike number 4, the Cheetah is the most comfortable, and I should mention availability as well. The Cheetah is something you can order right now. They're in stock. They are actually on sale on Black Friday for $26.99. The P61 wins on performance. Availability-wise, well, it's basically not available at all. This is a custom one-off bike that I built just for fun, but I am going to sell it. So I'll put a link in the description to a sign-up page for anyone that's interested. I think what I'm gonna do with this bike is sell it auction style to the highest bidder. So whatever you guys think it's worth, that's what's going to sell for. Now I do have a spreadsheet of all the parts that I put into this. The Tech brakes, the 203mm rotors, Pilot, see what I did there? Michelin road tires. This triple tree fork was a pretty penny. The headlight that's on here, SRAM X5 derailleur setup, the Bafang motor, the frame that you couldn't even buy if you wanted to, not to mention some of the custom machining and custom parts that I made. I know I spent around $3,500 just in the parts alone. So if I was to sell this, it's obviously going to go for much more than the $3,000 Sondors. If you could even buy a bike like this retail, it'd probably be somewhere close to $5,000. But again, I'm just going to auction it off to the highest bidder. We'll announce that very soon, and we'll see what happens. And again, despite the shortcomings of the Sondors, it is, in my opinion, the best looking bike, and so it wins on looks alone. Now it's time to tell you about option number 4. You're not going to find many mid-drive options, and the bike that I've got for you is in fact a mid-drive. But it isn't just any mid-drive. This bike comes from a company called WattWagons. Now, if you've heard of WattWagons, you already know what they do. Hopefully you are getting really excited because you know the sort of performance they can get out of Bafang motors. Today, I get to introduce you to the WattWagons Cross Tour. Now there are 2 different versions. The standard bike is going to come with the 1000-watt Bafang Ultra motor. So you've got that 1000-watt torque sensing motor. It's going to come standard with a 48-volt, 17-amp-hour battery. And this is going to be a very high quality build bike. Now remember what I just said about the P61. If I could even retail that one, which I can't even get the parts to build another one, it would be a $5,000 plus bike. Well, that's where the Cross Tour is going to be. That's going to be a Class 3, 28 mile an hour, and these are going to be available in early 2022. You can place a deposit and secure your pre-order starting today. Now, if you want more performance, this is where the WattWagons expertise comes in, because they have the supercharged version, the Archon X1 controller, which means that the Bafang Ultra motor, instead of being a 1,000 watt rated motor with a 1,500 watt peak, it's going to have a peak performance of 3,500 watts. That is something that you may have to register as a moped in some states. Now, it is going to come from WattWagons as, again, a Class 3 28-mile-an-hour bike, but if you want to unlock it after you get the bike, you can actually crank it up to 3,500 watts. Now, the power doesn't stop there. It has a massive 52-volt, 40-amp-hour battery. That is 2 kilowatt-hours of battery capacity, which is just insane. That is more than the dual battery Warthog bikes that we offer. 2 kilowatts is just basically unheard of on an electric bicycle. The other super cool thing about this is that it comes standard with an EV charger. So an electric vehicle charger you would normally use for charging your car, that's gonna come standard with the bike and will charge at a rate of anywhere from 6 to 12 amps. So that's super awesome that it not only comes with an EV charger, but that means you could stop at EV charging stations when you're out and about to quickly top off the bike and get a very quick recharge in compared to the normal charge speeds for most e-bikes. Now, the power and the battery capacity is going to come at a price, but honestly, these sound like a ton of fun. I can't wait to see the production versions and get these into my hands. As of right now, Black Friday, you can put down just a $500 deposit to secure your place in line to get one of these bikes for spring of 2022. I hope you enjoyed my overview of all these motorcycle-inspired bikes. This may be bringing up some questions you have about e-bike laws and at what point do you draw the line between an electric bicycle, a motorcycle, a moped, and I have the answer to that right here.